Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone and welcome to Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with Cindy Magnuson, and the show is about to begin. So slow down, take a seat, put your feet up, and maybe take some notes, because this show is about you, it's for you, and it is designed to help you receive exactly what you need to be a happier and healthier you. Hello everyone, and thank you again for joining me tonight in episode 11 on Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio. And I am, as a little reminder for those of you who are new here to me, this is Cindy Magnuson, your host. I am the owner of SEE Source Energy Epiphanies and founder of the SEE Technique EFT Plus. And tonight brings us to week 4 of my talks with Ivo Bove. And this evening I am going to be doing the show alone, and I'm going to be addressing emotional detoxification. So as we were proceeding through the shows with Ivo, it also comes up in the understanding of working through changing your diet, removing food items that you have been comfortable with and replacing them with more optimal healthy food items. That this process is also not just a physical detoxification, but it's also an emotional detoxification space. And so to begin here tonight, I would like to just go back and go over a few highlights of the shows with Ivo, just to bring us up to par. So I wrote today for the special number 11, I wrote out 11 of the highlights that Ivo had given us during his talk. The first one during his talks, the first one is research is important as you move into changing your diet. An optimal place to begin is to study from the works of people such as Arnold Ehret, Dr. Robert Morse, Douglas Graham, Dr. Herbert Shelton, T.C. Fry, Norman Walker, and many others who were mentioned throughout the show, and additional people that you may have also encountered on your own journey. 2, using the science of trophology, which is food combining, is exceptionally beneficial to assist transitioning your diet, especially if you are a meat eater, because this allows the gut flora to go through the necessary changes it needs to in order to help you to reduce your cravings. 3, the structure of our colon is not that of an omnivore's or a carnivore's, but that of a frugivore's, noting that we are a species designed to consume fruits. 4, people often blame fruit for the problems that it can initially give them when moving into eating more raw foods, when it is more of a problem with timing of eating the fruit and food combining. Thus, to better understand digestive times and food combining can help you to avoid digestive issues and uncomfortable transition symptoms. 5, foods such as meat, dairy, eggs, and grains are mucus-forming and acidic to our bodies. Our natural homeostasis is alkaline, and introducing an increasing number of acidic foods to our diet is at the root of most of our health issues that we are experiencing as a collective. 6, grains especially cause a caking and gunking up in the intestinal tract, and as a result of this, a mucoid plaque has built up in the walls that blocks the proper absorption of needed nutrients, and this is called malabsorption. 7, we are generally dehydrated at a cellular level because we are consuming a diet that does not consist of whole juicy fruits, but are dehydrated foods where the water content has been processed and or cooked out of them. The approach 8, the approach that mainstream allopathic medicine takes is to treat symptoms. True naturopathic approaches work on detoxification, which is removing the substances that are being consumed that are clogging up the lymph system, the kidneys, and the liver due to an overload of toxins. Humans in general are a species that are currently consuming significantly more food than the physical body was designed for and than what it normally needs to optionally function. 9, diseases that are purported to be incurable have been cured thousands of times already through detoxification. 10, cleansing and fasting should be approached properly, systematically, and per what level you are at in your current health and dietary lifestyle. 11, the goal here is to increase your understandings of how your physical body works and what it truly needs to function at its best. It can be dangerous to fall under a so-called expert's dogmatic thinking and not follow your own inner voice. Whereas it does take refining and increased self-awareness to develop a strong intuitive voice. This voice is, in the long term, your best advocate. No one single health guru has all of the answers for the entire world because we are so diverse. So learn it best to cultivate through your own self-observations and self-understanding. Which brings us to the topic today of how we can observe our own emotional patterns with food and how in more deeply observing when we eat certain foods, what rituals we have around that food, what events in our life draw us more towards consuming something, whether it is food or a beverage that we don't want to be consuming. And in the space of looking at when we are detoxifying, physically detoxifying, what is taking place is we are removing foods sometimes and or beverages, such as in my case, where there is a very strong emotional attachment to that particular food item or, again, beverage item. And we're going to take a deeper look at that. What I'm going to do is use my own space of working through a caffeine addiction space and going in and out of that to give a pattern of what takes place when we're trying to take something away, how we can observe the patterns around that and become more self-aware of what is running in our subconscious imprinting that is triggering us to have a more difficult time with giving up this item that we wish to remove from our diet. And I'm going to take the listeners today into a little more broad context. So I'm not going to address just alone what takes place emotionally as you are going through a detox, but what in general, when you are attempting to remove anything from your diet in general, anytime you're attempting to change a habit that is one of your most difficult habits to break, how we can observe both of those two spaces. They are basically the same. So as Ivo had pointed out when he was talking about detoxifying, that emotions that have been stored in the body start to come to the surface. And as an energy worker myself then, every energy worker out there understands, especially if you are working in energy work through something like hands-on, where you are touching a space, whether that's lightly or not, whether you are doing massage. When you place your hands on an area, over that area, or directly onto it, whether it's massage or Reiki, for example, and you bring your focus to that point, because one, palpably, I can determine that there is tight tissue in that area. Two, both intuitively, I can sense that before I even place my hands there through an intuitive scan. And then I can also have a certain sense of energy that's different, what's called Hibiki resonance, coming up into my hands that I can sense from that area. And we know as healers that when we bring focus to that specific area, very often, through our touch or even our presence of directing our hands there, directing a current there through our thoughts, that an emotional response, a physical response often takes place. And what we tend to see is a sigh, a puff of air, belching, gas. Maybe someone has to go to the bathroom right away, tears. All of these responses involve a water in the body. So what we are looking at in detoxification, physically what starts to take place during a cleanse, is that these waters that are stored in the body that carry a memory in them, even in the tissues themselves, within the energy systems, because it does have a specific location, but nonetheless it is something that you can reach throughout the entire body. And in those waters, there is an imprint on those waters. And when the recipient of energy worker of an energy session, or someone who is detoxifying, begins to break up the congestion in that area through the body even starting to remove it on its own by removing certain food items, and the body kicks in its ability to detoxify itself, you are releasing those waters from your body. Now, in energy work, there is an assistance level there. So you immediately have a presence of an energy worker who is holding a balanced frequency in order to assist that process taking place. When you are detoxifying your body on your own, if you do not have an emotional support space, friends, a group that you're working with, or if you're in need of a healer to work with a healer, you will begin to experience those emotions again that are stored in that space. So this is in both categories there, you are bringing to the surface what has been stored in the body through some traumatic space, and there is a congestion and a block there. So what you can do is have the support system to help yourself to pass through these stages where, when these emotions come up, you may go back into self-sabotage. So today a lot of the talk is going to be about how self-sabotage can come up through the emotions that we end up reaching in these two processes of either doing a specific energy work or doing a physical detoxification. So if we start to look at the physics principles in general, it has already been scientifically proven that water contains cellular memory, and our bodies consist of 70% water. And we understand that when we are belching what we feel is air coming out of us, that has water molecules in it. And gas has water molecules in it. So there is a water consistency through when we are releasing some of these waters, like a dam burst, we break through that wall and we release what has been congested in there. There is a water component that we can look at simply as where energy is stored and past emotional spaces have been stored in the body. So a lot of people in the audience may already be aware of people's work like Dr. Emoto, who did messages from water, and you can look up his work if you aren't familiar already. And what he did was he flash froze water molecules, and before he did that, he looked at how they looked flash frozen, of course, in, first of all, the neutral study space, without anything on the water. And then he took water and placed the word love around it, or in a container with the word love on the outside of that container, and then another glass of water with the word hate on the outside of that container. And when he flash froze those molecules and looked at them, he saw a very distorted foundational form and structure in the molecular level of the water that was completely opposite to the beautiful forms and geometric structures that were in the glass of water with the word love on it. So what he was showing us is that water stores and imprints what is in its environment. And that even brings us to a greater understanding of how environment is very impressive upon our entire DNA in general. And we will save a further talk on that for a different radio show, but keep that in mind, that the environment is what dictates what's going to take place inside the cellular structures. So consequently, everything that we are eating or drinking holds a cellular memory of whatever is stored in that, and we are taking that into ourselves physically. Now, in an optimal functioning situation, we do not have to consider that we are so weak that we cannot consume and transmute those lower vibrations back into beautiful forms, because we are designed to do that. However, in the space that we're currently moving through, we have inadvertently allowed ourselves to be inundated with a far too great amount of these distorted frequencies coming into our physiology. And I'm going to mostly stay on the physiology right now and not talk about the other planes, because of course it comes in also in thoughts and such. But just looking at the foods we are taking in right now, since we are communicating about changing our diets, that the foods that we are taking in, if we are consuming something that we can even physically determine already is altering us, we can also be reminded that with each and every item that we consume that has been denatured, hybridized, altered, structurally changed by genetic engineering, we are taking in misshapen, distorted frequencies, geometric structures into our physiology that in order for us to not have that dictate cellular changes in us, which means disease and illness, we need to drastically cut down what we are consuming that is not structurally beautiful. Dan Winter talks about genetically modified foods being angry DNA. You're literally taking in a DNA that is not happy because it has been pulled away from its happy form that it used to be and structurally changed. So the more that you can help yourself with techniques such as I'll be talking about tonight, like using emotional freedom technique to help yourself to strengthen your will to overcome these foods that have been altered. And with the little tips that I talked about, if you can remember that consuming foods that have lost their water content alone, we are even dehydrating ourselves more and needing to bring in outside water sources, and it's even very difficult these days to try and get a good structured water. But when you consume, and at best an organic fruit, but I certainly understand we do the best that we can because it is difficult. We are slowly changing our ability for us all to have good organic fruits and vegetables come to us because many more people are growing more of their own foods and creating more time in their lives to do these very important spaces for ourselves. But don't be hard on yourself and do the best you can with wherever you are at. So I'm going to take us through today the space now of emotional attachments to certain food items that we're trying to give up. Each one of you out there right now, unless you have mastered everything perfectly, and you could even be very far ahead and there's just still one area that you're still struggling with a little bit. And again, I want to remind everyone that as Ivo spoke and as other people will tell you, they progressed through these transitions to a whole foods plant-based diet in slow progressive stages. So again, there's no competition, no comparing. Wherever you are starting at, wherever you are at, the theme of tonight is looking at what one place in your life right now with dietary changes are you having the most struggles with. So I'm going to talk candidly tonight about my own struggles with caffeine and the emotional space that's around there to help you to come to an understanding of how emotions are so closely tied up with a particular space and habit that we know we want to change, but where we consistently have a difficulty with this. So I began my relationship with caffeine back when I was going to college and I was working 33 hours a week, taking the bus everywhere, and I was going through semesters in school that ranged 15 to 17 credit hours. I was exceptionally busy for 2 years straight in a row. I one, didn't go out anywhere, and two, I was, averaging about 5 hours of sleep a night. And I had at that time done dietary changes, but we're going back to when I was 18 years old. So, that's several decades of years ago already. And I want to point out that at that time, caffeine at that time when I started was not a topic that I was feeling I needed to address at all. But I had gone through the regular spaces that were open at that time about we were adding vitamins to our diet and looking at superfoods. And basically back then it was coming off of white flour and going on flour and reducing sugar from your diet. So there were other standard areas that were different for me. I was coming off of processed foods. I had been raised on thinking that, a Twinkie was healthy. And when I learned that, a Twinkie had a shelf life of 6 years, my jaw dropped. And so at that time, it was a little bit different. But if I'm going to examine, and you are going to examine your relationship, whatever is the most difficult for you to change, you want to go back and search if you can find the time frame that you began to utilize this substance and somewhat abuse this substance. So for me, that goes all the way back to that time of being 18 years old. And when I go back and look at that space of what it meant for me, when I changed my dietary habits at that time, I became the black sheep of the family because I stopped partying, I stopped eating the same food, I saved all my money and put myself back through school. I was contrary to everything else that was taught to us as to what everyone else in the family was doing. And in a way, it was appearing that I was criticizing what they were doing, and yet I would have loved for all of them to have enjoyed that space with me for what I had found. So caffeine at that time is also associated with the emotions of having me prevail against the odds of being alone in my journey without a family support around me, not only without a support, but with everyone denouncing me, literally to the point of, feeding my children food behind my back, etc., and making fun of things like that, thinking it was funny. So it has a memory space for me of being more emotionally charged with using caffeine, because if I couldn't keep up what I was doing when everyone else was against me, what if I didn't make it? So there's an emotional fear within there that I have the odds against me, not only for my own self that I might not make it, but that then I have to face the onslaught of what a family was thinking about me. So in your own case, when you look at what you have been consuming that is the most difficult for you to give up, you want to begin looking at the ritual of that food or beverage item. When do you use it more? When do you use it less? Is it associated with a family ritual? What fears come up when you think about stopping consuming that particular food item? So in this space, we are going to start to look at and start to document and write down. So as I'm going to be approaching a first commercial break here, if you are interested in continuing in here, I am with constructive EFT sessions here. What I'm going to do is take us into your space that's most challenging to you and guide you through 3 different EFT sessions and how it can be applied very simply, and then how it can be applied in a second stage of how to neutralize the statements that you are discovering that you have that are part of what is stored inside you as an original trauma that may be related to what is difficult for you to give up this particular food or beverage item. And then even going back into the childhood space again, we will look deeper into how we could communicate with the child to release the space that originally has traumatized some part of your experience. And the associations can be very loosely associated in your mind right now. But as we dig in a little deeper, you may find associations that you never imagined were going together with what you're attempting to do, meaning that people have come in and worked with me, especially in a 4-week course. There have been times when I've worked with someone that by the time the 4th week comes, and I may have seen the pattern and even introduced what I believe is the greatest pattern that is imprinted from childhood in an emotional expectation about life, in general, a self-sabotaging fear space. And that person may not be able to connect it to why they are sabotaging self in their current space. But by week 4, that space bridges the gap, and they can clearly begin to see how patterns that have been imprinted out in us in childhood become our life expectations. And if we learn to observe life with more depth in an entirely different perception level and awareness level, we can then work to see how these patterns are childhood imprints, and we can release ourselves from these childhood imprints. So I'm going to go to a commercial break right now, just maybe about 3 minutes here. And if you're interested, grab yourself a pen and paper. I am going to be presenting questions out to you that you can begin taking notes. And before I forget, I wanted to remind everyone that I did do a show on emotional freedom technique as the very first episode of Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio. So you can find some additional information about EFT in there if you find that this talk tonight is a little bit advanced. And also, in regards to tapping tonight, I'm not going to make this a beginner session of teaching the tapping points. Anywhere that you want to tap on the body is going to work tonight. If you know the tapping points, utilize them. If not, just simply tapping anywhere on the body is going to be tapping on meridians and stimulating them. So with that, I will see you back in 3.
Feminine Frequency Radio Network hosts shows 7 days a week. Call in to listen live 929-477-1183 and dial 1 to connect to the studio to ask a question, or listen online via blogtalkradio.com/Feminine Frequency Radio Network. Organic Frequency Radio Show is 1.5 hour live chat with Stephanie and Oksana and their lovely guests about the nature of existence and holistic way of living here and now, and perhaps even after. Join us every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Call-in number to listen live is 929-477-1183, and to ask a question, press 1 to connect to the studio. Our guests share their stories and walking path of their healing, along with services that they have developed and packaged for the rest of the world to experience and benefit from. We're here to hold a space for an exchange of experiences for the purpose of evolvement and expansion of consciousness.
Hello and welcome. You are now entering the corridors of Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with your host, Cindy Magnuson, premiering Thursday evenings, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Feminine Frequency Radio Network. You are invited on a talk radio journey to the center of self. Join us as Cindy guides you, the listeners, in sensory and perception upgrades where revelations and golden epiphanies pierce the veils of illusion. Don't miss this opportunity for your next dose of Twilight Epiphanies. Okay, and welcome back, everyone. So we are continuing to look at emotional detoxification and how we can use emotional freedom technique to work through challenging spaces. One, if you are doing a physical detox and emotions that have been stored in the body begin to come to the surface. Or two, if you are simply attempting to make any dietary changes, and as you're attempting to do that, you're finding with some of your challenging areas that self-sabotage continues to rear its head. So tonight I want to have here a casual and open and a bit candid conversation here. So as I take the readers into the listeners into my own personal space, I was able to come off of caffeine after a 40-year habit, approximately little over a year, or going on 2 years ago, actually. So I was caffeine-free for quite some time, maybe almost a year's space. And in that time frame, little over a year ago now, I was asked to once again offer my personal support to a family member that literally death was on the doorstep, months after months after months. And caffeine was called on again. And I want to say that I don't want to demonize my relationship with caffeine. And in all cases, when we have a food item that we felt, believed, or associated with strength at the time for whatever reason, that I don't want to at this time look at it as being negative, other than for the space that I am no longer needing that space of caffeine in my life. So caffeine at that time was able to keep me from going into a dissociative space, from going out of body in paralyzing fear spaces, and being able to sustain. So life for me and EFT changed from utilizing it to heal to utilizing it to sustain me, to help me to survive. And I want everyone to understand that these are the spaces that very many people are still working through. And a lot of times we are way too hard on ourselves. I have clients who are still experiencing extremely challenging situations. And there are spaces where only time and continuous creative positive input can change those spaces. And they are also in spaces that I've been in, which are more of a survival space. Your focus shifts. Literally, more than half of my energy was going towards the needs of another person and making life and death decisions at every step of the way. And so when I'm post that situation now, I have a new set of imprints with caffeine. So now it is a space of fear, even greater fear that's associated with it. And yet, in this current place that I'm in, I do not truly, and if I ask myself that, I do not need the caffeine. The caffeine is keeping me more now in a fear space when the actual fear is no longer here. And that's an important space to look at, okay? Because sometimes we carry our coping mechanism, that a coping mechanism that isn't in our best interest, but it sustained us when we felt or believed, or maybe in some small ways, as I felt I really did, I needed that grounding. Caffeine is a strong energy. She is a strong, powerful plant, and she did give me strength. I do not need that strength in that respect right now. Now, the space of cutting down nowhere's near to what the initial space 2 years ago of coming off of caffeine was, when it was a 40-year habit and I was coming off of it. Coming off of that space was like taking a teddy bear away from me. I was mad that it was something that I knew I had to give up. I was angry that I had to give it up. I was disappointed and I was fearful. Can I make it? But I did. I have the strong imprint of coming through it. I have this time around a much more profound imprint of knowing what it's like again, that sense of feeling, and this is important too, I can still feel the space of being caffeine free, and I have the memory of no longer having it in me and of how my energy was more sustained in the day, and I was not experiencing the adrenal fatigue. I was not experiencing the more easily being triggered into fear spaces. So a secondary space is that we sometimes have forgotten how it feels to not have our coping mechanism, and we don't always believe that we can reach a space of feeling good again. But the only way to truly know is to move through that space. So, the first thing to do here is to go into your thought process and come up with what you find is the most difficult for you when you are attempting to make a dietary change. What is the most difficult for you? And write that down, because that space is what is going to be called the setup phrase. That's going to be the focus of what you are first going to be looking at. So, are you having difficulty with giving up meat? Are you having difficulty with giving up grains? Are you having difficulty with giving up sweets? Is there a beverage, also a stimulating beverage, a caffeine beverage? Is there maybe an alcohol beverage that you would like to give up and isn't part of your whole foods, plant-based changes you would like to make? And begin to look deeper at that space. That is going to be your primary focus. And what we tend to forget about these spaces, and what is beautiful about looking at transitioning, is that sometimes there are alternatives that aren't even aware of we can begin to replace this habit with. So part of transitioning to a plant-based diet is an initial opening into this space of what you're working through. If pizza is your fondest space, it isn't difficult to begin maybe with a gluten-free crust, an organic sauce, and trying some of the vegan cheeses which are coming out. And you can maybe begin supplementing that way. And if you're willing to experiment enough, you may find, something you will find. If you're willing to experiment, you will find what's best for you. And as you begin with a gluten-free crust, then you can move up to a spelt crust. Then you can move up to maybe even a cauliflower crust, something different. So in stages as you wish, you can slowly begin to transition the products that you use into healthier alternatives. And very many of these food groups have wonderful recipes for this. They are all over the place. As a side note, a lot of people think that, vegans and plant-based people don't eat delicious food, and we definitely eat delicious food. So it's a very nice place. Now, so taking your first statement place, I would like you to look at allowing your mind, as I start to talk about some examples that I have encountered in working with emotional freedom technique, what people found to be the emotional trauma that was stored within them that was having them self-sabotage their place. So, for example, one woman that I was working with in one of the classes, had traced her childhood programming back to when she was trying on a dress, and her mother had remarked that she was going to be too fat to get into a dress. And so something she then later on she was eating, and her mother remarked she wouldn't be able to fit into it. And that space of being criticized about not being able to fit into a dress had stayed with her all her life until she revealed within a course that she took with me how whenever she began to implement a program and lose weight, in the back of her mind would start to bring this emotion up to the surface. And when this emotional memory came up to the surface, she would get so angry about this happening that she started to turn it into, well, if I lose weight, I'm doing it for my mother, and I don't want to do that. So she would then systematically self-sabotage out of that place and stop herself. And it was literally in the fourth class, she sat in front of me and she said, so for the last 10 years, I've been repeatedly self-sabotaging myself on this one little space here at the root of me not wanting to concede to lose weight because it would be appeasing my mother who called me fat. And what was important about what I stated to her at that time was, but we're going to look at that with three of my most favorite words. That was interesting, literally. When we reveal these places where we come to the understanding that memory that's been stored in the body and starts to come to the surface as an unresolved emotional issue can have such a profound effect in our lives. It's not worth any emotion giving to it where we feel ashamed, embarrassed, or humiliated over this. We want immediate self-forgiveness and allowing ourselves to love ourselves for the joy that ahead of the game we now learned this beautiful new understanding that we can apply to every single area of our lives completely and start to change these inner imprinted conditioning programs of misunderstanding and traumas that have brought themselves into our lives as expectations and as blocks to our progress. So reverse engineering there, we removed that thought process. And now each time when she progressed forward, she was able to successfully continue with her program because that inner voice wasn't under her radar anymore and keeping her from success. Another person that I worked with in a class I asked her to go back and look at when was the last time that you were successful with a health regime, changing diet, exercise that you were comfortable with and it was successful. And go back to that time and what took place at that time that sabotaged you. And when she went back there in memory, again, you're slowing everything down right now. I want you to go back in your memory. Your intention will bring up memories here. And she went back to that place, and here it is. Aha, she had the epiphany. She said, I remember that someone said to me, I started to look like my mother. And because my mother has significant mental illness, I was afraid that I was going to move in that direction like her. And I stopped then, and I gained all my weight back on and started eating what I used to eat. So there, in that space, she was able to identify, one, is that a truth that was taking place there? It is not a truth that she was going to become like her mother, but she associated that there. So that was a starting point there for us to begin to dissolve that old inner programming. So as you're out there in the audience, begin to let your mind use your intention to ask for memories from the past that are associated with this particular habit that you wish to break to come to the surface for you. Another lady in a class, 80 years old, she's a nurse, and she has the intention all the time of changing her diet. She's very successful business-wise. She said learning new routines were okay. Learning throughout the nursing, everything was okay. But when it comes to this home situation where she needs to do a special diet for herself, she just can't find the passion to do that. And in the class, the memory comes up to her. You know, I'm remembering that I was in school and the teacher slapped me in the face, and she never told me why. And to this day, I'm still holding on to anger for that place. And for whatever reason at that time, I can't remember the other details of it, how it was intricately connected. But that space of how it made her feel so low in self-worth, and she couldn't figure out what she did wrong. So there was a personal self-doubt area that was disconnected and still running that trauma. And what we did with EFT, I helped her to realize she does not need to be personally in the presence of this teacher in order to heal that wound.
Call in to listen live. Organic Frequency Radio Show is 1.5 hour live chat with Stephanie and Oksana and their lovely guests about the nature of existence and holistic way of living here and now, and perhaps even after. Join us every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Call-in number to listen live is 929-477-1183, and to ask a question, press 1 to connect to the studio. Our guests share their stories and walking path of their healing, along with services that they have developed and packaged for the rest of the world to experience and benefit from. We're here to hold a space for an exchange of experiences for the purpose of evolvement and expansion of consciousness.
Hello and welcome. You are now entering the corridors of Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with your host, Cindy Magnuson, premiering Thursday evenings, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Feminine Frequency Radio Network. You are invited on a talk radio journey to the center of self. Join us as Cindy guides you, the listeners, in sensory and perception upgrades where revelations and golden epiphanies pierce the veils of illusion. Don't miss this opportunity for your next dose of Twilight Epiphanies. Hello, everyone, and welcome back from that commercial break. For those of you where it had been talking about a woman who had a situation when she was a child that because she couldn't go back to that teacher and ask her why she was slapped in the face, she had remained frozen in that one single angle of perception about that, and there was a grieving and an anger that festered as an energy signature there within her that continued to remain in her life and affect situations personal to her that she was attempting to do in certain situations, such as in her home, she would be needing to consume a completely different diet than what her husband was agreeing to, and she could not find a resolution in that. And then the memory of this came up to the forefront as being part of what was connected and linked in here. And then as we were able to open up a new angle of perception on that, because the truth of the matter was there that it wasn't the child who was doing something wrong that she felt maybe she needed to remember and had some fear and self-doubt, because if you're carrying a space where you were punished and you don't know why you were punished, then it can have an expectation in life that when you try to do something else, you won't be able to figure out if it's right or wrong. And someone else is seeing you as doing something wrong. So that needed to all be reviewed and understood for the truth that was taking place, which was that a teacher, an adult, an authoritarian figure at that time was the person who was out of balance. And in forgiveness, she was able to look then and feel the space so deeply that she felt she could even go back there and state to that teacher within our time-traveling space, which is what EFT basically is doing when you're tapping into these resonant spaces that are stored within the body, is that she was able to say, I forgive you, but still that it was wrong to do, it was not the appropriate response, and that she loves herself as a child, and that it's okay, and something was not her fault, or she did not deserve to have that shock happen to her. Which brings us secondly to one of the most common patterns that I see also is that these bigger traumas happen in our life when, as a child, we are feeling vulnerable, free, open, carefree. Everything's happy. We're playing, having a good time. And an adult is not having a good day, or we just happen to walk into some situation and bam, we are shocked out of our good feelings about ourselves, and an adult figure, usually close to us somehow, is saying, no, you don't have the right to be feeling self-love and good about yourself because this is who you really are. And it's usually some type of a criticizing words coming with very strong emotions. And it's that shock that takes the child out that is very critical. That's an important factor. that you're feeling free and happy and good, and bam. Because what I find very often in working with adults also is a fear of leaving a space of imbalance and moving back into a free, joyful, peaceful, happy, more carefree, even vulnerable space. Because it becomes a trigger that if I feel good again about myself, that shock's going to happen to me again. Which also brings us into what I was mentioning earlier in the way of expectations, that these patterns and imprints then also become self-fulfilling expectations as we move along. So there is this intricate process that spirals on top of these childhood experiences, and it's difficult to see them happening when we're an adult, to recognize these energy signatures within our adult experiences until we sit down and begin to evaluate, such as this space here, what are the patterns that are around the most problematic places in my life where I feel the most challenge with changing something. So as you are going into your own place, your own resolution of your most challenge, these are the types of places we are looking for that are at the root issue of, as an energy signature, of why something is challenging. So I'm going to begin here with going into a first round of very simple emotional freedom technique tapping. And in its simplest place, what we do is just name the situation in 3 setup phrases, even though I have this, and in my case, I'm going to say my caffeine addiction. I deeply and completely love and accept myself 3 times. You sitting in the listening audience there will easily be able to translate very quickly and insert your wording into there. Now, this is called borrowing benefits. Not only have I personally experienced this many, many times already, Gary Craig, the founder of EFT, thoroughly writes about this, that he would have people on stage that he was doing an emotional freedom technique session with that was personal to them. And the audience was tapping along. And the audience members tell me this all the time when I do group sessions. Oh, I just simply put it into my own words. I heard, even if I'm doing personal sessions, oh, I slightly changed that wording when you were saying something, when you suggested something. I changed it to make it more personal for me. So it's a natural process to personalize it for yourself out there in the listening audience. And as well, it's not possible for you to tap in someone else's habit. It's not how it works. You have to, this happens through a process of great trauma. So we're going to then, after the 3 setup statements, we're going to start tapping. And again, tap anywhere on the body that you want, on your sides. Tap your wrists together, tap on points in your face, on the top of your head, or do the EFT points if you know them. Generally, you do about 5 to 7 light to moderate taps and then move on to another point. And in this first space, I'm just going to show you the simplicity of a very easy technique here, just in its simplest form. So before we begin, you can rate how you feel about the anxiety of trying to change this habit. on a level of 1 to 10, a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most difficult, the most stressful, how would you rate what you are feeling about needing to make this personal change that you're specifically working on? And then after you have that number, just write that down or keep that in mind. And now we're going to put our hands across our heart to begin with what we call the setup phrase. Even though I am struggling still with giving up this one last cup of caffeine, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I am struggling still with the challenge of removing caffeine completely from my dietary habits, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I have gone back on caffeine again in a time of great struggle, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And now begin your tapping. This caffeine habit, drinking caffeine still on a daily basis, eliminating coffee completely from my life, reducing and removing caffeine on a daily basis. Caffeine, consuming caffeine, consuming caffeine, consuming caffeine every day. The negative effects that caffeine is doing to me on a daily basis. The challenge I'm facing with giving up caffeine. The difficulty I'm feeling with giving up caffeine. This is hard for me to give up this remainder of caffeine. The challenges that I'm feeling. The self-doubt that I feel. The fear that I'm afraid to leave. And then bringing your hands back across your heart. Okay, and what I did there was I left it very simple. So instead of having at this point in time a lot of different phrases that I was using in there, I wanted to show you perhaps how you were able to sense a bit of calming already with utilizing at least the statement that begins there with that you are already absolutely proclaiming that you forgive yourself and you totally accept this space, because what they have found in 40% of cases that the door is even closed to allow healing to take place because out of guilt and shame and blame, we tend to build up a reservoir of feeling that we don't deserve to heal from this. And that again becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. So now you can ask yourself, did you have any effect from that? So what does take place is that's what they sometimes call is the first round. We tap on some of the negative aspects, meaning I just simply named it and talked about what a little bit very briefly about what I'm trying to change. I'm getting focused here. I'm building focus. And when you're tapping on the meridians of the body or tapping on any of the body, you are initiating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is now associating this habit and this feeling with a calming feeling, because tapping produces the parasympathetic nervous system to start automatically bringing you back to homeostasis. you're reassociating, you are rewiring the feelings about it back to being calm as opposed to being in a heightened state. And the effect of EFT here is that we are building ourselves up to being able to come to a place of calm and centeredness and assertiveness in order to then begin really proclaiming what timeline and situations we do want to connect ourselves to here, as opposed to the route that we're on. We want to shift timelines. And when you can move yourself more into a centered, neutral state of calm, you are heightening your creative capacity. So now what we want to do is begin to ask ourselves some more questions. So as I'm asking these questions, you can begin to take some notes, and some of them already I've presented to you. Do you remember a time when you had accomplished what you're attempting to do, and then you stopped that progress and you went back to your old habits? So what was the situation that was taking place at that time, that first time when you had the most success with accomplishing what you wanted to do? And if you haven't accomplished this particular space before, go back to a place that you remember feeling very confident, very good about yourself, very structured and disciplined in the level that you wanted. Go back to that space. And then what was the situation that took place that took you out of balance? Next, take a look at what are the situations that were in the past or are taking place right now around you that often lead to you consuming more of this particular food item or this general type of foods in general, or this particular beverage. What are your general stressors that when you move into these, encounter these trigger points, that you tend to misuse and imbalance this particular item as more of a comfort level for you? What are the situations that trigger you the most? All you need is maybe 1 or 2 spaces to even be thinking about right now. And again, you can go back into this later on, stop and pause, and sit down and think a little bit longer about it. Are there any certain rituals that you do not feel comfortable with leaving that pertain to the challenge of removing these food items from your dietary habits? Some people have return from work habits. Some people have family rituals. Some people have morning rituals that automatically come up in their mind as being stressful, that they're going to have to that they're not going to feel good because they won't be able to participate in that particular ritual. Are you afraid of losing friends as a result of making dietary changes? Are you afraid of being criticized for making changes? Have you been criticized before when you attempted to make food changes? Was there people around you unhappy at work, at home, in other encountering spaces? Do you have a feeling that this is too difficult for you to accomplish? Is it a situation of time or a situation of organization that you are feeling you don't have enough space for. So as you are looking at those and taking notes, what we do then in a more constructive emotional freedom technique place is that those points go on the left side of a piece of paper, for example, underneath what we call the negative section. And then on the other side of those, each one of those spaces, we want to begin to reframe those thought patterns around these types of questions. And there can be many more questions if we need them to spawn more memories, but this generally is enough to bring you in. So on that right side of the paper is going to be statements that negate these beliefs that have become solidified from memories upon memories upon memories upon the original initial trauma memory stacked on top, and has become usually a very large cesspool around that area of very criticizing, self-negating, self-limiting dialogue. And in order to remove that, one, we're going to bring it up to the surface, and we all have these connections that are back to these thought patterns, but these thought patterns happen and memories happen so quickly that what I call them is being under our radar. We don't understand that they are part of what is blocking us from moving forward until we stop and take a very good look at them. So what I'm going to do in this second set here is I'm going to do a more what I do with everyone in my first initial session with them when I'm working in emotional freedom technique is what I call the umbrella first session. And from gathering information, I would formulate statements for you that negate the situations you're in, also helping you to write and make these statements. So either we're in a class structure where I'm teaching you to write your own statements, but I'm also in that situation giving you ideas and receiving through my intuition to help you to get to these very deep spaces. So the point is, in my emotional freedom technique teaching and sessions, I am always teaching you to do this for yourself. So what I did was I just have some statements here that as those questions were here, that I would address them for how I'm moving through this caffeine space. And it will open up energetic spaces within you. And again, as you're tapping here and going in, simply put in your spaces. But remember, the energies here are the same. You are going back and forgiving the people around you. You are forgiving yourself. You are allowing healing to take place. You are releasing yourself from this patterning from the past out of your focused intention and choice. So as you put your hands over your heart for 3 setup phrases here, and what I'm going to do is this is going to be a free flow, and I'm going to attempt to catch as many different energy signatures in here as I can for your benefit out there. Even though I have these past memories of beginning to use caffeine in order to keep myself going through a challenging time frame when I was making changes that weren't supported by my family. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though my feelings feel painful in reflecting into the past over not being accepted for the very beneficial changes that I wished everyone was enjoying, I am choosing to forgive those family members who were not supportive of my new progressive changes. Even though I continued to use caffeine in order to help myself move through a great deal of fear when I was asked to recently go back into challenging spaces helping another individual in my home. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And tapping, I am choosing in the here and now and all dimensional spaces, past, present, and future, to release this emotion of utilizing caffeine in order to feel safe and secure and able to commit and continue on with any of the challenging spaces around me that were requiring me to go above and beyond my normal energy levels or to face traumatic fears around me that were paralyzing me in fear. I am choosing to forgive those individuals in the past who did not have the greater understanding to view the very positive decisions I was making, and I give understanding to them to have their point of view, and I forgive their feelings that they were having towards me that were criticizing and judgmental of the changes I was making. I forgive myself for being angry with family. I forgive myself for continuing on into using caffeine longer than what I originally needed to use it for, to where it became abusive to my physical body and started to cause significant imbalances. I have many friends around me who understand the value of consuming foods with higher vibrations in them. I am not alone in my journey, and I have great support for my dietary choices to reduce caffeine in my diet. I am enjoying great internal strength. The situation that occurred and resulted in me going back on caffeine is now resolved, and I am choosing to move forward from this place. I am safe. I am secure. I am free to fully love myself. I know the truth is I do not need the caffeine. I enjoy going without caffeine. I enjoy the feeling again of not having caffeine as a crutch. My cravings for caffeine are reducing daily. It is easy to determine that the caffeine is only going to increase any fears I am sensing. I am choosing to release the fear from the past and open up to peace and calm. I enjoy waking in the morning and having herbal tea. I feel so good when I start my day with herbal tea. When times are stressful, I turn to tapping to calm the feelings of fear and stress. Even though family members would prefer now that I drink coffee with them, I enjoy making an herbal tea, and I'm so proud of myself for the strength and the good vibration that I am putting in my body. I thank caffeine for what it brought me through and honor this time to return to herbal teas when I wish to celebrate a ritual of enjoying a warm beverage. I forgive others when they feel disgruntled because I have made choices that they have not been able to make yet in their lives. Even though I have failed so many times at trying to maintain this new choice, I completely love and accept myself. I forgive myself for having been weak. I release all shame, guilt, and blame that I am feeling about consuming too much caffeine. And with your hands back over your heart, I am love, I am joy, I am peace, I am serenity, I am calm, I am happy, I am caffeine free, so be it. And we can take a nice deep breath and slowly come out of that. Allow yourself here to enjoy the calming vibrations, the peace, often we feel lighter. A smile comes on our face again. Okay. And in this point here now, you can ask yourself, from the original rating that you gave yourself, has that rating changed or gone down? So in the moment here right now, I definitely was beginning to, during that session, see myself drinking herbal teas, feel myself drinking herbal teas again, and feeling happy with that ritual. So I was reassociating myself with that. And what's best to do after this then is to continue with tapping in this type of a space on a daily basis for at least 30 days when you have a very serious habit that you are wishing to change. And from this umbrella session there, you may have had memories come up. Maybe as one of the places you were attempting to say, you noticed inside that your body was still rebuttaling that. If you felt your system saying, no, I can't do that yet, then that is where you need to work the most in. And you may need to change some of that phrasing to, even though I'm still feeling a resistance, I am choosing to keep the door open in this space. Because some of you sitting out there, it may not be the time yet that you're going to use this in its strongest. Because we do choose the times that we are going to utilize these tools to their best abilities. And when those two are coupled together, when you truly have the choice and desire to change, and then you utilize a tool like this, it is highly successful. And then lastly in here, while you're sitting there still in a nice calm space, you can ask yourself what the inner child in you who has the most to do with this particular challenge that you're feeling, this block and moving forward, needs the most. And for that child to come forward. And as you see that child in your mind's eye, you want that child to know from your heart that whatever took place was not their fault. They were a child. That they were not to blame. And that whatever space an adult around them was having in imbalance that day, was something that they were experiencing that was not because of them. And that if that adult had been able to heal themselves before then, this situation would not have happened. And that you, as your adult now, can let that child know from your voice that they are beautiful, that they are lovable in all ways, that they are perfect, and that what you want most for them is that they know that they are safe and secure, and that it's time for them to be with you in your heart, open, carefree, even vulnerable. And that you are always there to keep them safe. And as you look them in the eyes and tell them how much you love them, you are wrapping your arms around them, bringing them into your heart. And as they merge with you, they are once again connected, loved, and happy. So on that note, I am going to be ending here, and in next week's show, I am going to be doing a show on intuition. So we had talked about in these shows here on transitioning our diet and strengthening our own inner voice of wisdom for what's best for us, that it is difficult to know which voice is the true intuition. And a lot of times what I find is that people don't understand that they have much more intuitive faculties than they are aware of. And it only takes a little bit of refinement and observation, being more self-aware, to begin to determine and discern which voice inside is the one that we should be listening to. which all has to do with what we were just doing already even. So I'm going to be doing a talk on that, and I will be announcing that during the week. So with that, I wish you all much happiness, health, and well-being. Have a very blessed week, and I will see you next Thursday night. Bye-bye now.